As the Olympics wind down in Rio, we look at the biggest moments of the 2016 Games. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. All eyes on Brazil over the past 2 weeks as athletes from around the world swim, run, wrestle, tumble and fight toward the medal podium in hopes of bringing home gold. Here to discuss the highlights of the Games, CCTV's Stephen Gibbs joins me from Copacabana Beach in Rio de Janeiro. And Stephen, as the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio draw to a close, what have been some of the bigger moments?
Well, it's difficult to know where to begin there. I mean, 10,000 athletes competing over 2 weeks. There have been endless highlights. I suppose we could focus on the celebrity athletes that have got a lot of attention. Above all, there's Michael Phelps, the US swimmer, finishing his career with 23 gold medals. Been an absolutely spectacular thing to watch there in the Olympic swimming pool. Also, another celebrity athlete, of course, who was running last night, Usain Bolt from Jamaica, finishing off his career, a triple gold in the 100 and the 200 meters, and of course his traditional sign-off there to the crowd. In the gymnastics, Simone Biles from the US, who seems to be kind of single-handedly revolutionizing gymnastics, again being a total delight to watch. For China so far, really it's been Olympics perhaps with not the huge medal haul they might have been expecting, but no less absolutely dominating some key areas, particularly the diving, getting all but one of the gold medals there. For the home team here in Brazil, Thiago Braz da Silva, the pole vaulter, pretty much unknown around the world before this Olympics, now the hero of this country. An absolutely spectacular final there where he pole vaulted to gold, completely beating any of his previous personal bests. Although that event did highlight something else that's been very noticeable here, and that is just how partisan the crowd here has been at the home grounds for this Olympics. You've got to bear in mind Brazil is above all a footballing nation, so it's completely normal for supporters of sport here to cheer the home team and boo anyone else. And that was seen at a lot of events whenever Brazil was playing, and in fact when anyone was playing, and that has raised a few eyebrows amongst IOC officials, but one could also argue that sort of added to the special atmosphere of this Olympics, the first ever in South America.
Right, now, Stephen, athletes have been making headlines on the field and in the pool, but some have also made headlines in Brazil off the field as well. The world watched on Thursday as the US swimmers were detained and indicted for lying to Rio authorities about an armed robbery. What can you tell us about that story?
Well, I think the sort of reaction here really was that just did seem incredible at the time, that 4 leading American athletes could be held up in an armed assault, and then lo and behold, of course, it did turn out to be literally incredible and not true. I think it's touched a nerve here in Brazil. Perhaps you know, if one can generalize a little bit about what Brazilians say about themselves, one thing they do tend to say is they are very happy to criticize their country and their system, etc., but they're a little bit sensitive when others do so. So when this happened, and you know, a leading American athlete saying something happened which really kind of lives to the caricature in some people's minds of Brazil, you know, that you can't get into a taxi without taking a serious risk of being held up by gunpoint, which, you know, look behind me now, that is clearly not true. The fact that that was so publicly made, that accusation, and then proved to be a lie, has really certainly irritated many people here in Brazil.
All right, thanks, Stephen. That's CCTV's Stephen Gibbs reporting from Brazil. Joining us now to discuss this year's Olympic Games from Rio de Janeiro, Tanya Braga is the Head of Sustainability, Accessibility and Legacy for the Rio Organizing Committee. With me in the studio, Wang Guan is Chief Political Correspondent of CCTV America Mandarin Service. From Oxford, England, David Owen is a long-time sports journalist. He writes for Inside the Games. And David Steele, with us in the studio as well, is a columnist for Sporting News. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Let us start by looking at your favorite moment from the Games so far. Let's go around the table, starting with Tanya. Tanya, what's your favorite moment?
My favorite moment was definitely the opening ceremony, with a message, a fun and engaging message on environmental issues such as climate change and biodiversity. But comes the gold medal for Brazil with Rafaela Silva, issued from a social project that used sports to bring life opportunities for kids in poor areas in Rio.
David Owen, what was your favorite moment?
Jo Jones is just such a great ambassador. I don't like the word, but ambassador for Britain. She's a great athlete. Nothing about the sort of fame that she's found now appears to have changed her. You know, she represents everything that's good about what Britain has done in the Olympic Games in the last dozen or so years. The women's marathon, it was just a combination of being about a metre away from the athletes as they came running by. Partly, I have to say, because the crowds for a lot of events have not been very big here, but also there was a fairly good-natured street protest that broke out as some of the runners were running by. So from a journalist's point of view, that's pretty much perfect.
Wang Guan, what was the highlight for you so far?
I think it was the 100-meter swimming, 100-meter butterfly final, when the Singaporean swimmer Joseph Schooling, 21 years old, beat Michael Phelps. What's interesting was there was a photo of him 8 years Olympics as a teenager asking for signature from Michael Phelps. And then what's going viral was a photo way years ago and 8 years after, when the little teenager, you know, idolizes Michael, and then 8 years later, Michael Phelps congratulates the up-and-coming young swimmer for beating him. So that really encapsulated the sporting spirit, because you know, dreams do come true.
Right, there's always something about the underdog winning, right? David Steele?
It was also a swimming event. It was Simone Manuel from Texas winning a gold medal. First of all, it was a big surprise, but also she was the first African-American woman to win a swimming gold medal, and that touched something so deeply in so many Americans, because they understand the history of African Americans with swimming, with pools, how that fed into the integration and the civil rights movement back in the 60s, how it was such a groundbreaking thing. And the fact that it was part of just this tremendous success story of all the swimmers, with the Michael Phelpses and the Katie Ledeckis, and really all the swimmers from all over the place, but to be able to join the rest of the country and the rest of the world with that in an event that African Americans had never had great success or great access to, really meant a lot to me, to my family, to a lot of other African Americans and Americans in general.
Okay, let's get back to Tanya. Tanya, these games have come to Brazil at a time when the country is facing multiple problems. There's an economy that's faltering right now. There's a political crisis with the president facing impeachment. But Brazilians have managed to put that all aside. So what do these games mean for Brazil right now?
It means that we show our resilience, our capacity to deliver excellent games for the athletes, for the spectators, in the middle of the perfect storm. So it shows the capacity of the Brazilian people to overcome difficulties and to receive the world with all the warmth and open arms.
David Owen, as a sports journalist, whom for you are the standout athletes from these games? You know, the sort of names that we will associate with Rio 2016 in the years to come.
Well, Phelps, I suppose, again, and Bolt again, because of what they've done here. Possibly Neymar, depending on what happens in the football final. In terms of, I mean, that's part of the problem for sport at the moment. It tends to be the same old people who've been at the top for a while. I'm struggling to think of newcomers. Probably the Fijian rugby team, which was another great story. The first ever gold medal, first ever medal, I believe, at the Olympics for that Pacific nation. So that was a very good story. Charlotte Dujardin and Laura Trott. have also, again, from a British perspective, become the most decorated female Olympians in history, so that they'll also be remembered in Britain, although probably not so much anywhere else, I suspect.
Guan, for China, one of the sensations at these games has been the swimmer Fu Yuanhui. She didn't win gold or anything like that, but the online publication here in the United States, the Huffington Post, called her great, funny, and instantly lovable. What's the story behind her?
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, you don't hear the press talking about praising lavish their praise on the Chinese athlete that way. Usually they talk about, how athletes, gymnasts in particular, suffer from this nationalized sporting system. But Fu Yuanhui is very natural. He's very spontaneous. He's not camera shy like many of her other Chinese peers. Usually Chinese athletes are a little awkward, if you will, in front of the cameras. They don't know how to interact with the media, but not Fu Yuanhui. After a team relay swimming final, during an interview, he did not perform that well. And during the interview, she honestly said, I have my period. And then, not even many Western female athletes would say that. I mean, some interpret that to mean that Chinese girls can be just as it's a liberating force. It is what it is. I mean, if you have that, you're not performing to your maximum capacity, and you admitted that. It's not as if it's something that you can hide. So it's very spontaneous and natural, and that's how I think why she's liked by both Chinese and people in the West.
David, broadly looking at the games themselves, if we look at the medal count right now, the United States way up ahead in first place. What's the secret? It's a broad question.
Part of it's not really a secret. Much of the Russian delegation isn't there, or else there would be a much closer count. Right. But I think the sheer volume of athletes that they're in a position to send, and it sort of says a lot about what the Olympic program is like in the United States. The sort of cooperation you get both from the government, from all the organizing committees, and also from the corporate sponsors and the networks and things like that. But they've also done a great job making sure that women get a lot of opportunities. And if this wasn't the first time, it's one of the very first times that there have been more women representing the United States at the Games than men. And that has really added to the level of competition, the level of participation, and that's meant a whole lot in gathering up and having great success in a wide variety. It's not just track, swimming, some of the other more popular ones, but they've sort of cast a wide net, so to speak, in terms of the different sports that they've been able to win medals in.
Yeah, so when you say large number, they've been able to enter in a great number of disciplines, more than any other country.
They are. I mean, it's interesting to see so much success in things like kayaking and taekwondo and a lot of those other sports, wrestling, they always started someplace small where there's only been a couple of the wrestlers or a couple of the athletes in that position, and they've grown the programs from really almost zero to something where they've been able to compete on a worldwide level.
I think you have to think very, very hard for a sport that the Team USA is not good at. Very hard. Mm-hmm. Maybe ping pong, and that's it.
Yeah.
for the rest of the sports, you guys rocked it.
We got some catching up to do, whatever. And that's the thing, we're driven to do things like that. There are kids who are looking and seeing things like badminton or ping pong and saying, I want to do that. And they, next thing you know, a program will grow up and, maybe by 2024 or something like that, there's going to be a medalist. It's a crazy phenomenon.
The Chinese have owned ping pong for a very long time.
We should own more than just ping pong.
Tanya, Brazil, the Brazilian athletes, of course, had one great advantage at these games. They had the home crowd. They had the home crowd behind them. But how did they fare in the sports themselves?
The home crowd, it's a very important part of the games. And I think another interesting aspect is these games gave the opportunity for Brazilians to know different sports, to engage with other sports. And this is something that only hosting the Olympics at home, we can leave a legacy for more sports to be known by Brazilians.
David Owen, let's talk about the fortunes of Team Great Britain. They've been fluctuating between second and third place in the medal count. But when you look at these games and you look at Britain's participation, has Britain again cemented its place as one of the big sports powerhouses of the world?
Well, yeah, it's pretty amazing that they're, I think, still above China when you think of the relative size of the two countries. I don't think even the most bullish competitors in Britain commentators in Britain were expecting that. It's another proof of how the program that's been implemented using national lottery funding here is working. It's not just the money, it needs to be spent properly, but I think money is probably the most important performance-enhancing substance in sport, and I think Britain's performance to a large extent reflects that over the past 3 Olympiads.
Gwen, China, of course, has been exchanging that second and third place with Britain at these games. Disappointment in China?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a letdown in among some Chinese friends back home. On social media, they're talking about the fact that in the Beijing Olympics, we used to be #1, even beating Team USA, which was a big surprise back then. And then in London, as a solid #2. And in fact, in Atlanta, Barcelona, Sydney, Athens, we have been consistently #2s. But not this time around, not yet. So yeah, there's a little disappointment. But there's also been some people reflecting why that's the case. Some point to the nationalized sporting system. Some say that the cycle, the Beijing Olympics generation 8 years ago is fading away. You can't count on the old people anymore. You have to cultivate more younger players. And thirdly, you have to have like grassroots participation, like the United States. Everyone goes to the gym. Not everyone, but virtually everyone works out. You love it. You do it for the sake of loving it. So results will come years to follow.
Okay, we're going to have to take a break right now. Coming up, do the Olympic Games open the opportunity for diplomacy through competition? Plus, a look ahead to the future of sports. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat. Welcome back. We're recapping the 2016 Rio Olympic Games as they come to a close. Still with me, Tanya Braga is with the Rio Organizing Committee. Wang Guan is a correspondent for CCTV America's Mandarin service. David Owen is a longtime sports journalist, and David Steele is a sports writer. David Steele, undoubtedly the US is the big winner as far as medals are concerned, but Team USA is also making news, or I should say a few individuals in Team USA making news off the sports field as well. Brian Lochte, has that tarnished America's success at these games?
It has. It's sort of cast a cloud on what all the athletes have done. And not so much the overall medal count, but just some of the great individual stories and successes, and people who have won medals in the sport for the very first time in American history. And they're getting very little airtime, very little time to get celebrated in their own country, much less anywhere else, because the talk in the United States and around the world is focusing on what those swimmers did in that gas station and how they handled it. I mean, it's embarrassing. It's a black eye. I think that it's going to take some work for everybody to sort of separate the two and say that doesn't reflect on everything that the United States has done overall and as Olympic athletes, but they're in a huge spotlight. They handled it incredibly poorly, and unfortunately all the other athletes and really all Americans period are going to have to pay for it. They're going to have to hear about that from people in other countries who are there to celebrate the Olympics, and they see the biggest name of them all, the superpower, embarrass everybody like that.
Tanya, this is the first time a South American country is hosting the Olympics. Brazil is the first country to do that. What does it mean for the region?
It means that we can have the opportunity to be close to the global, to have this celebration with all the other countries in the world, I think it was very important that the first games in South America were also the first games to have a team of refugees, to show to the world this open heart of Brazil and our culture of tolerance and diversity.
David Owen, let's talk about how the teams got here. After the 2012 London Olympics, the United Kingdom pledged $466 million for sports development in the UK. What is your view on that? Has that been a good investment?
Well, it's been a good investment if you look at the medal count. The question is, does winning a lot of medals make the country a better place, a more positive place? I mean, it gives the country a whole boost for a couple of weeks, but does it or should it do more than that? I think the answer to that is quite complicated. It's still quite a new thing for Britain to do this well at the Games. It doesn't yet seem to have reflected too much in increased grassroots participation in sport. And frankly, if it was going to, you'd have expected that to happen after the home games in London. You know, obviously as a sports journalist, somebody involved in sport, I tend to think, yes, it's a good thing, but I also quite understand the view of people who think the money would be better spent on schools, hospitals, that sort of thing.
Wang Guan, you've talked several times about the nationalized sports system in China. How does that system work?
Well, Anand, I've been to a gymnasium where the 4 or 5-year-old gymnasts, Chinese girls, train. They train very, very hard. Yes, you know, sometimes the condition was harsh, but we should also bear in mind that this nationalized sporting system gave opportunities to tens of thousands of young Chinese kids from underprivileged backgrounds from the Chinese countryside.
When you say nationalized, it means all the funds come from the state?
Well, mostly the funds come from the states, and also for sports like gymnastics, swimming, weightlifting. You know, the government organizes their training, give them salaries as if they're state-owned enterprises, and works like that. But this system gives the opportunity for those poor kids, poor Chinese kids, the chance to train and to excel and to take up a sport and love it, the opportunity that they would otherwise not been able to afford. But yes, this system is under scrutiny right now. You know, we should not only have the system geared towards churning out more medals, but really to cultivate grassroots participation, to build more you know, basketball courts, soccer field in Beijing, more swimming pools in Shanghai, things like that.
David Steele, the system here in the United States, of course, is very different from that in China. It's driven very much by private enterprise, isn't it?
It absolutely is. There's so much corporate funding, corporate sponsorship, a lot of private fundraising that goes on. A lot of the companies come up with a lot of creative ways to bring money to the athletes, and so it spreads a lot of opportunity out to a lot of people. And yet, even with that, there are ways that, at least I hope, or I wish, that they would, you know, pick up on some of the things that the Chinese system does, and even the Russian system does, the state-sponsored system does, in giving more opportunities to the young athletes who don't have the advantages, who are very, very poor and don't have access to things like swimming, to things like soccer, and the sports where it's really sort of tilted toward the rich and the people who already have privilege and advantages. Overall, I think they do an excellent job, and obviously the number of athletes and the number of medals they've won reflects that, but clearly they could still do more. I mean, the corporate funding is great, but there are windows that they can open up to bring more people in.
Tanya, we've got a few minutes left, but I have to ask you this, and this is about the actual medals that are being awarded in Rio and how they have been manufactured. What can you tell us about that?
We innovate in the material we use to make the medals. Gold medals are made with mercury-free, what avoid environmental and human impact. We also use the 30% of recycled silver and 40% of recycled copper in the bronze medal, and also recycled material from PET in the lanyards. And the beautiful medals come with, they are made of sustainable certified wood.
David Owen, the next Olympics will be in Tokyo. Now, we know that there's a lot of prestige attached to hosting the Games, but it comes at great cost. Are cities around the world still as eager to bid for this, to bid to host the Games as they used to be?
Not as much as they used to be. There are still 4 cities, Rome, Paris, Los Angeles and Budapest, who want to host the 2024 Games, the one after Tokyo. So that's enough as far as the IOC is concerned. The Winter Olympics is more of a problem for them. I think that the thing about the Olympics now in the television age is that the big potential benefit for cities is simply that they have literally the eyes of the world upon them for 2 or 3 weeks. So it's a real opportunity to rebrand themselves. If they'd been able to hold the Games in or 2011, I think Brazil and Rio could really have rebranded themselves. I think now the economic cycle has changed so much that they just haven't been able to make the most of the opportunity. That's a sort of point for regret, I think, for me and probably the Brazilians about what's happened this time.
David Steele, last few seconds. How long do you think it's going to be before Michael Phelps' gold medal tally is going to be beaten?
I hope we're all alive long enough for it to happen. That is an outrageous number. That's that's almost out of reach. It's sort of the Babe Ruth, Will Chamberlain of records.
Possibly not in our lifetime.
Not in our lifetime, possible.
Okay, we're going to have to end it there. Thanks to all of you for joining us. That's all we have time for, but the conversation continues online. You can see all our coverage of the 2016 Olympics at cctv-america.com/Olympics and catch up with us after the Games on our social media channels. We're on Facebook, Twitter and Weibo. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.